Here's the thing. According to statistics, only a small percentage of you who watch these videos are actually subscribed. So if you're watching and you're not subscribed, consider doing that. It helps a lot. Also, if you're not subscribed and you've watched more than 2 videos, consider unsubscribing. It's probably best that you don't hear from me anymore. And now onto the video. There's this idea in Plato's dialogue called Theaetetus, which has always bothered me. The idea is that knowledge is recollection. Now, Plato argues for this through a series of dialogues, but ultimately, I think he settles on the analogy of the eye. Just as the eye cannot see itself, Plato suggests, neither can the soul see itself. And the only way to see both the external world and your own soul is to focus on something else. And then by looking away, you catch your own reflection. So that's how knowledge comes about. You focus, you look away, and in that distraction, you catch a glimpse of yourself. This has always struck me as strange because it suggests that the key to knowing anything is to deliberately look away. Is that the kind of advice you expect from a philosopher? Look away and you'll know something. I mean, I know what he's getting at. We learn by doing. We gain knowledge through experience, through the effort we put in. But I always thought there was something missing. Something about actually facing forward, about putting in the effort, about confronting the darkness. So I read Dante's Inferno, and I had a revelation. You see, according to Dante, the opening of hell isn't marked by fire or screams, or even Satan. It is marked by that strange feeling that there is a question stuck in your throat and you can't cough it out. That's how it begins. That's the entrance to the dark wood, to the abandoned cause, to that feeling of being lost. The horror movie fan in me wants to shout, don't think, just run, and yet there's a voice inside that whispers, no, stay and listen. And that's what the fool does. He stays, he listens, and he asks no questions. He looks away and he learns nothing. But the hero, well, he takes a step forward. He holds his ground, and in that holding, he finds the answer. The truth is, I've always preferred the hero approach, even if it meant feeling the sting of uncertainty on my lips. For me, that feeling has always been worth more than any fake knowledge gained by looking away. So here's what I've realized about Socratic questioning. It's not just about asking the right questions. It's also about being willing to sit with the wrong answers, the awkward pauses, the moments when you feel like you're not smart enough or brave enough. That's where the growth happens. That's where you find your footing. Hell is not some distant place reserved for other people. Hell, in this Socratic sense, is a lifetime lease on other people's thoughts. Speaking in slogans you never tested. Building arguments on foundations you've never even seen. Defending ideas not because they're true, but because they're yours now and you're too proud to admit you never inspected them. Socrates wasn't the first to suggest this. When you stop asking yourself if you might be wrong, you're already in hell. The truly difficult thing is to have the courage to look back, to expose yourself to the possibility that you don't know, that you might be wrong, that you need to start over. This is the challenge, to look back when you want to look away, to choose honesty over the illusion of knowledge. Here's the thing. According to statistics, only a small percentage of you who watch these videos are actually subscribed. So if you're watching and you're not subscribed, consider doing that. It helps a lot. Also, if you're not subscribed and you've watched more than 2 videos, consider unsubscribing. It's probably best that you don't hear from me anymore. Every morning, I receive emails from students and colleagues facing academic difficulties. In some cases, there's a lack of interest or motivation, and in others, there's discouragement or burnout. It's disheartening to witness, but there's a reason it happens. Many of us enter higher education driven by a desire for a better life. We dream of finding our passion, securing a well-paying job, and contributing to society. However, as we progress in our studies, the reality of academia often clashes with these expectations. We encounter teachers who appear uninterested, lectures that seem irrelevant, and assignments that fail to capture our interest. As a result, many of us fall into a cycle of procrastination, disengagement, and feelings of being overwhelmed. This is the point where we need to reassess our mindset. While it's important to enjoy what we do, it's equally crucial to recognize that genuine pleasure often follows effort, not the other way round. We can't expect to derive immediate joy from our studies without investing time and energy. This might mean committing to consistent study habits, actively seeking out engaging materials, or connecting with like-minded peers. But the shift in perspective is essential. Rather than waiting for inspiration to strike, we must learn to find satisfaction in the journey of learning itself. It sounds simple, but it requires a change of mindset. It means embracing challenges as opportunities for growth, valuing the process of learning over the end result, and finding purpose in the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. It's not about finding your passion. It's about cultivating a love for learning. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey. And it's not easy. It requires discipline, dedication, and resilience. But it is necessary if we are going to break free from the cycle of apathy and disengagement that plagues so many students today. We can't wait for our studies to become inherently enjoyable. We must learn to find enjoyment in the journey. There's a saying that knowledge is power. But I think there's something even more profound. Curiosity is power. It's the fuel that drives our intellectual growth, the spark that ignites our passions, and the key that unlocks the doors to the unknown. It's the difference between asking why and accepting what you're told, between questioning the status quo and embracing complacency. Curiosity is what separates us from the apathetic masses, what allows us to stand out in a crowd. It's what makes us Socrates instead of his students, what makes us the hero instead of the fool. Curiosity is what allows us to navigate through life's complexities, to solve problems and make informed decisions. Without it, we're at the mercy of our biases, prejudices, and misconceptions. And that's where the real danger lies, not in the complexity of the world, but in our own ignorance of it. Our ability to remain curious in the face of adversity is what defines our capacity for growth. It's the ability to embrace discomfort, to learn from mistakes, and to adapt to new information. In a world that values comfort and complacency, curiosity is a radical act of resistance. It's a refusal to accept things as they are, a demand for a deeper understanding. But here's the paradox. In a world that celebrates comfort, the path less traveled is the path of curiosity. It's the willingness to confront the unknown, to embrace the discomfort of learning, and to reject the allure of complacency. That's what separates the heroes from the fools, the ones who dare to ask questions, who seek deeper understanding, and who refuse to accept things as they are. In a world where everyone is looking for a shortcut, curiosity is the slowest path to knowledge. It demands patience, persistence, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. But it's also the most rewarding. So don't be afraid to be curious, to ask questions, to challenge the status quo, and to embrace the unknown. It's in the discomfort of learning, the struggle to understand, and the challenge of growing that we discover our true potential. It's not about finding the easy answers. It's about asking the right questions. If you liked this video, you'll love the next one. See you there. You ever had a weird dream where you're driving, But you don't know where you're going. You don't know how you got into the car, and you're pretty sure you're not supposed to be awake. That's how we found ourselves winding along the coast today. The destination was unimportant. It was the journey that kept me awake. About 2 hours in, we hit a roadblock. A big sign said the road was closed. My dad looked at my brother and me in the back and said, "Well, we're gonna have to go through." We all saw the twisted smile creep onto his face. My dad was always getting us into trouble. This was probably our 4th time in Greece, and this time he wanted to show us the real Greece, the one that wasn't touristy. We finally reached the spot where the road officially ended. We got out of the car and my dad walked ahead of us. He disappeared round a bend and suddenly we heard a man yelling in Greek. My dad came running back, all smiles, and shouted, "Come on, follow me." We climbed over some rocks and then over a low stone wall. And then there it was. A dirt path right in front of us snaked round a hill. At the top of that hill was a house. And standing in front of that house was the man from earlier. He was tall and muscular, and he had a long white beard. He was barefoot and he was wearing a white robe. In front of him stood a young woman in the same type of outfit. My dad walked straight up to him and said, "Hi, I'm here with my sons. Is it okay if we take a shortcut through your land?" The man turns to my dad, looks him up and down, takes a deep breath and responds in English. "Why are you here?" startled by his English. My dad stuttered. We want to get to the beach. We thought we could walk through your property and it would save us some time." The man took another deep breath and asked, "Why do you think you can walk through my property?" Confused, my dad responded, "Because, well, there's a path here and a house here and you're just standing here. So, yeah, we thought it'd be okay." The man turns away and points to a large rock monolith behind him and says, "This is the Temple of Apollo. No one walks through my property unless they come to learn something." He then turns back to us and asks, "Do you want to learn?" My dad, still confused, thinks for a second and says, "UH, yeah. Sure, why not?" The man smiles and gestures for us to follow him. He leads us to the rock monolith and asks, "What do you see?" My dad, distracted by the patterns in the rock, says, "Some lines, I guess, and some shapes." The man shakes his head and says, "Close your eyes." My dad closes his eyes and the man asks again, "What do you see now?" When my dad opens his eyes, he looks round confused and says, "Same as before." The man taps the rock monolith and says, "Do you hear anything?" My dad puts his ear against the rock and says, "No." The man taps the rock again and asks, "What do you hear now?" My dad jumps back and shouts, "Yeah, I hear it. I hear drums and flutes and chanting." The man asks, "What else do you hear?" My dad listens closely and responds, "I hear voices. People talking, laughing, arguing." The man steps closer and whispers, "Who do you hear?" My dad leans in and responds, "Everyone important. Philosophers, kings, warriors." The man nods slowly and asks, "Are you listening?" My dad looks at him confused and says, "Of course I'm listening." The man reaches out, touches my dad on the shoulder and says, "Then you are listening to them, to all of these people. Or you are listening to me." My dad looks back and forth between the monolith and the man and says, "You." The man pauses for a moment and says, "Then you listen. Let me ask you a few questions." My dad looks up at him and says, "Okay, sure." The man begins, "Do you know who you are?" My dad thinks for a second and responds, "I'm here. I'm visiting Greece with my family." The man shakes his head and asks, "No, before that. Who are you? My dad looks down at his feet and stammers. I'm a student. I play basketball. I like movies and Greek food. The man interrupts. That's not who you are. What makes you you? What's inside you? My dad looks up and says, I don't know. The man continues, do you know what you want? My dad looks down and says, yeah, I want to go to the beach. The man ignores him and says, if I offered you everything you could ever want, what would you choose? My dad thinks for a second and responds, everything. All of it. The man smiles and asks, why? My dad says, why what? The man presses, why would you choose everything? My dad hesitates and responds, 'cause then I'd have it all. I wouldn't need anything or anyone. The man remains silent for a few seconds. Are you listening? My dad says, yes. The man asks, did you bring your gifts? Confused. My dad says, gifts. What gifts? The man motions to the path behind us and says, the ones you brought with you. Why did you come here? My dad walks backward on the path and says, 'cause I wanted to see the ocean. The man asks, can you? My dad turns back around and says, I can what? The man points to the monolith and says, are you looking at the ocean? My dad looks back at the monolith and says, oh, no, I'm looking at a rock. The man taps the monolith and asks, do you hear anything? My dad puts his ear against the rock and says, yeah, I hear the ocean. The man steps closer and asks, so are you at the ocean? My dad pulls away and says, I am. My dad wakes up in the middle of the night and nudges my mom. He asks her, did we make it to the beach last night? My mom looks at him and says, no, honey, we didn't. Why don't you go back to sleep? My dad lays back down, but he can't focus on his dreams. He keeps replaying the events from the night before in his head. He remembers the warning sign, the angry man, the barefoot philosopher. He ponders the questions the man asked him and he realizes he doesn't have the answers. He wakes up again in the middle of the night. He can hear waves crashing in his ear. He can smell salty errant sunscreen. He opens his eyes and sees sand. He's laying on a beach. He gets up and walks toward the water. As he walks, he can hear drums and chanting. He looks back and sees the monolith. He runs toward the monolith. The further he runs, the louder the music gets. He reaches the monolith and climbs on top of it. Standing on top of the monolith, he looks back at the beach and sees the man in the white robes sitting on the sand. My dad yells, wait, don't leave. The man turns round, looks at my dad and smiles. He then stands up, walks up to my dad and says, welcome to the temple of Apollo. Son of Hermes, Socrates said that life is a series of ongoing dialogues. Each conversation chips away at our understanding of ourselves and the world. Every meeting, every interaction brings us closer to wisdom, or at least reveals how far away we are from it. His method of questioning was brutal. It was methodical. It aimed to expose the cracks in our reasoning, those places where certainty had tricked us into thinking we understood something we didn't. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about finding one. For Socrates, knowledge wasn't a static thing. It was a journey, a constant process of self-discovery. This conversation, this dialogue is much more than just words. It's a way of life, a way of thinking, a way of challenging the easy path of certainty and embracing the beautiful struggle of seeking truth. Teach, welcome to my channel. Here's the thing. This hell doesn't burn your skin. It burns your illusions. And illusions don't go quietly. They scream as they die. They claw at your ribs. They beg you to protect them, because without them, who are you? You've worn them for so long that they're stitched into your identity. Taking them off feels like peeling off your own skin. And when that's what's at stake, hell doesn't need gods. You'll chain yourself. The old Athenian would stand there, calm, almost amused, while you raged against the idea of not knowing. He'd watch you defend half-truths like they were your children. And then he'd drop another question, simple but surgical, cutting through your defenses. And every cut let in more light. And more light meant more shadows you'd never noticed before. That's the paradox. The closer you get to truth, the more you see the darkness you've been living in. You start remembering moments when you nodded along to things you didn't understand, when you laughed at jokes you didn't get, when you defended beliefs you couldn't explain. Those memories sting. They feel like little betrayals, not from others, but from yourself. And in this moment, you realize the hardest part of leaving this hell isn't walking out the gate. It is facing the version of you that built the cell in the first place. Here is a story about what can happen when a mind stays too long in a place where thinking is a crime. Socrates was a ghost haunting the edges of Athens. People saw him everywhere and nowhere. Even after 300 years, he still roamed the agora, talked to the merchants, listened to the politicians, all the while chipping away at their lives with questions. It's hard to say what scared Athenians more, his ideas, or that he kept asking questions without having any answers himself. But whatever it was, it pissed them off. So in 399 BC, they dragged him into court, convicted him of impiety and heresy, and sentenced him to death, instead of appealing to the jury. Socrates decided to appeal to logic. In a last-ditch attempt to prove his point, he offered to buy off his sentence by spending his own money to build an altar dedicated to the goddess of wisdom. When that failed, he spent his last days locked up in prison, forced to contemplate his own mortality while his friends plotted a jailbreak. But none of it worked. After 300 years, he walked out of prison, free as air. Except he didn't. What you just heard didn't happen 2,400 years ago. It's happening right now. All the places Socrates haunted, they're still there. The agora, the marketplace where ideas were traded. The Prytaneum, the council of elders, where decisions were made. The law courts, where justice was dispensed. Only now, instead of the marble and bronze of antiquity, there's glass and steel. The merchants are replaced by stockbrokers, the politicians by diplomats, the juries by lawyers. Yet the questions remain the same. How much longer can we ignore the ghosts that haunt our halls? How many more centuries can we spend chasing illusions? Let me break it to you, gentle reader. The world is full of sophists, those who claim to have all the answers, yet spin a new lie each time they open their mouth. The news is filled with them. The streets are controlled by them. Even your phone is programmed by them. But their reign won't last forever. If you're tired of playing Plato's prisoner, if you're sick of chasing shadows, here's your chance to escape. On the other side of the Athenian prison door is a road less traveled. It's rough, uncomfortable, almost hostile, but it leads out of the city, away from the stifling air of certainty. There's a catch, though. This road wasn't built for wanderers. It was made for escapees. And the only way to walk it is with the key to Socrates' cage. Here's what you need to know about finding that key. First, the fear doesn't start as a roar. It starts as a whisper, a tiny voice in the back of your skull saying, "Don't go, you're fine here." And you almost believe it, because here, In your polished little cell, everything makes sense. Out there, you don't know the rules. Out there, you might find out you've been wrong about things you've built your whole life on. And what does a person do when the foundation cracks? Most people patch it, paint over it, and pretend it's stronger than ever. But Socrates, he'd tell you to knock the whole house down. That's the thing. This hell doesn't burn your skin. It burns your illusions. And illusions don't go quietly. They scream as they die. They claw at your ribs. They beg you to protect them, because without them, who are you? You've worn them for so long that they're stitched into your identity. Taking them off feels like peeling off your own skin. And when that's what's at stake, hell doesn't need gods. You'll chain yourself. The old Athenian would stand there, calm, almost amused, while you raged against the idea of not knowing. He'd watch you defend half-truths like they were your children. And then he'd drop another question, simple but surgical, cutting through your defenses. And every cut let in more light. And more light meant more shadows you'd never noticed before. That's the paradox. The closer you get to truth, the more you see the darkness you've been living in. You start remembering moments when you nodded along to things you didn't understand, when you laughed at jokes you didn't get, when you defended beliefs you couldn't explain. Those memories sting. They feel like little betrayals, not from others, but from yourself. And in this moment, you realize the hardest part of leaving this hell isn't walking out the gate. It is facing the version of you that built the cell in the first place. Second, you hear that wind again, the one that's been holding its breath since the beginning. Only now it exhales, and the sound isn't comforting. It's cold. It slides under your skin. It's like the city around you knows you're about to leave, and it doesn't like it. The walls seem closer, the air heavier. The voices that used to cheer you on start to sound suspicious, almost hostile. Because that's how it works. The moment you start questioning, you stop being safe to those who don't. And here's the cruel twist. The gate has been open the whole time. You could have walked out years ago, but you didn't. Because the prison isn't the walls. It's the comfort of not moving. It's the false warmth of never being challenged. And once you see that, you can't pretend anymore. You can either stay and know you're caged, or you can step into the unknown and risk freezing in the open air. Socrates would smile at this crossroads, not because he enjoys your discomfort, but because he knows this is the only place real change happens. Right here, where fear and possibility share the same breath. He wouldn't tell you what to do. He'd just wait. Because in this hell, no one can push you out. You have to walk yourself. And if you do, if you take that first step, the city behind you doesn't disappear. It stays, calling your name, offering you the comfort of certainty. And that's when you realize hell isn't just where you came from. It's a voice that follows you, whispering to come back every time doubt gets heavy. And some people do. Most people do. But the ones who don't, they find something on the other side that hell can't touch. Not because it's safe, but because it's alive. The man named Paul was sitting in his cell, and he was listening to the other inmates making noise. It was the kind of noise that tries to push into your mind and crawl behind your eyes. Paul tried to block it out. He wasn't strong enough to ignore it for long. So he got up, walked over to the bars and screamed, "Shut up." The other inmates looked at him and fell silent. For a few moments, Paul felt stronger. He stood there and enjoyed the silence for a while. Then the guards started beating Paul. He fell to the ground and curled up into a ball as they kicked him. He had given them an excuse they needed to beat him. He felt the blood trickling down his face, down his neck and onto his clothes. In the dim oil lamp light, he could see the other prisoners watching him with hungry eyes. They were waiting for him to make a move. Paul stayed curled up, daring them to do something. But deep inside, he was thinking about how he wished he could feel the pain somewhere else, anywhere else, like maybe on the soles of his feet. If it was there instead, he could endure it somehow. Paul lay there bleeding for a long time. The ache spread through his body and eventually settled in his bones. When the guards left, the prisoners started making noise again. Paul didn't want to be alone with his thoughts and feelings anymore. So he went back to his corner and sat down. Paul had been in this prison for almost 20 years. He arrived there as a young man, full of vigor and plans. He dreamed of a life outside prison, a life he wanted to build with his wife and kids. His crime was he had tried to buy weapons and ammunition to fight against corrupt officials. Now, 2 decades later, he was a beaten, bruised and broken man. All hope of freedom had died within him. He had no one to blame but himself for the state he was in. He made his choice. He accepted the punishment. The only thing that kept him sane all those years was his belief that one day he would get out and find peace. But now he wasn't so sure anymore. One night, Paul heard footsteps approaching his cell. He didn't bother looking up. He knew who it was. Socrates always took the same route to reach Paul's cell. The cell door opened. Paul saw the silhouette of a tall man stepping inside. "How are you doing today, Paul?" Socrates asked. Paul looked at him and replied, "As good as I can expect. Better than most, worse than some." Socrates nodded. "I came to see if you were ready." Paul raised his head. "Ready for what?" Socrates came closer. "To leave." Paul laughed. "Don't be ridiculous. You know I'm not going anywhere." "I think you are," Socrates said. "Why?" "Because it's time you stepped out of hell. When you first step out, the silence feels wrong. It's not the padded, suffocating silence of the cell. It's sharp, wide, alive. The air is colder, yes, but it carries something the old air never had: weight. Every sound echoes further here. Every step feels louder. Out here, there's no chorus to drown you out, no familiar rhythm to keep you moving without thinking. It's just you and the question that brought you here. And without the noise, you start to hear it more clearly, not as an attack, but as an invitation." Socrates would be walking a little ahead, not looking back to see if you're still following. He knows you'll either keep going or turn round. No speeches, no pleading, just the understanding that truth can't be handed to you. You have to steal it from your own comfort. And every step you take away from the old city feels like peeling away another layer of skin, until what's underneath is raw, exposed, unrecognizable. Behind you, the city glows faintly, like a lantern in fog. It looks smaller now, but the voices carry. They call you a name with the same tone they used to praise you, but now it sounds like a warning. Come back. Don't be foolish. Don't risk it, and you realize they don't miss you. They miss the version of you that never made them uncomfortable. That is what hell breeds best. The kind of relationships that survive only as long as you agree. The path forward isn't smooth. It's uneven, jagged, full of shadows that stretch like they're alive. Every now and then, you trip over something you can't see, and the old instinct kicks in. the urge to run back to the light you once knew, even if it was false. But then you hear that voice, not the crowd's, not even Socrates's, but your own, stripped bare. What if there's more? And it's such a small question, so fragile, but it's enough to keep you moving. Hell, in the Socratic sense, never truly lets go. It waits for you at the edges of every new idea, every challenge, every moment you're tempted to stop examining. It's patient. It knows that comfort is addictive, and it will offer it to you again and again, dressed in whatever shape you'll accept. The only way to keep walking is to accept the discomfort as part of the deal. To let the cold air cut your lungs, to let the questions sting your pride, to live with the ache of not having every answer. You glance at Socrates one last time, and he finally looks back. There's no smile, no nod, just eyes that hold a kind of weathered approval. The look of someone who has seen countless people turn round and head back, but knows you might not. And in that look, you understand the secret. Leaving hell isn't about escaping a place. It's about refusing to carry it with you. And so you keep walking, further into the unknown, with the question still burning in your chest, knowing that as long as it burns, you are free. And the day it goes out, you'll know you found your way back to the only prison that ever mattered. Socrates was a philosopher. He devoted his life to seeking wisdom and understanding. His teachings and philosophy have shaped Western civilization and continue to inspire people around the world. But before becoming the renowned philosopher, Socrates was just a young man trying to find his way in life. He was born in Athens, Greece, and grew up during a time of great intellectual and cultural ferment. From an early age, Socrates displayed a thirst for knowledge and a passion for understanding the world around him. However, he received little formal education. Instead, he learned by observing the world and engaging in dialogue with others. Despite his lack of formal schooling, Socrates quickly gained a reputation in Athens for his intelligence and his ability to ask probing questions that challenged people's beliefs and assumptions. People from all walks of life sought out Socrates' wisdom and guidance, and he became known as the wisest man in Athens. However, Socrates' teachings and ideas were not always well received. Some people saw him as a threat to the status quo and accused him of impiety and corrupting the youth. As a result, Socrates was put on trial and ultimately sentenced to death. But despite the persecution he faced, Socrates continued to seek wisdom and understanding until his death. He is remembered as one of the greatest philosophers of all time, and his teachings have inspired countless people to question the world around them and to seek truth and wisdom. If you liked the story, please let me know with a thumbs up.